Today we are in week 8, and we are looking at the first half of chapter 7. And the title that we're giving to this section is Wisdom in the Shadows. So chapter 7, we're going to look here at the first few verses in just a second. We ended chapter 6 with the Ecclesiastes trying to figure out what is good. Do you remember this? This is what we were talking about in the previous section. In chapter 6 verse 12, he said, "For who knows what is good for man while he lives the few days of his vain life?" Who knows what is good? And so today he's going to take a little bit of a rabbit trail, and he's going to talk about some of the things that he believes that he has discovered that are in fact good, or at least some things that are better than other things. In fact, I have a little exercise for you. You can do it I'll even let you do it during the service if you brought a highlighter, okay? Here's what I want you to do. Highlight all of the words better in chapter 7, because this is a key word here in this section, especially these first 13 verses. Just go through and highlight the word better. You're going to see that this is what he's talking about. He's discovered some things that are better than other things as he's been doing his research under the sun. The result of Solomon's search is a list of sayings that really resemble proverbs, which he also collected, which he seems to live by. And as you think about this, it's really not that bad of a strategy for how you live your life, right? When you find something that seems to be consistently true or work, right, then you turn that into an axiom and you live by it until something comes along that proves to be better than that, right? It's a good way to live your life. We make discoveries like this through life, and the truths that we uncover, they really are like gems or nuggets that we hang on to that become very precious to us. And I'm sure you have some of those. Hopefully you have some in your repertoire that comes straight from the Bible that, really guide you in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So let's see what the Ecclesiastes has uncovered here in this section. Let's read the first few verses here of chapter 7. "A good name is better than precious ointment, and the day of death than the day of birth. It's better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. For this is the end of all mankind, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. The heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth." Let's just go that far for now. In these first 4 verses, you'll see that he's kind of using a contrasting set of ideas. He's going to talk about death and mourning contrasted with like birth and joy and feasting, right? There's this contrast going on. And so he starts here in the first half of verse 1 by saying, "A good name is better," there's your first one, right? "Is better than precious ointment." Now, we know something about precious ointment when we look at other places in the Bible. It was a little later in history, but it was still pretty similar in John chapter 12, where Mary of Bethany anoints Jesus' feet with her hair, right? She used this precious nard, this ointment. 1 pound of it was worth nearly a year's wages. That's pretty good ointment, right? Some of you have like nice perfume or cologne that you wear. Any of you have some that costs a year's wages? I don't think so. But a good name, it says, is worth even more than that kind of ointment. And then look at the second half of verse 1. It says, "And the day of death is better than the day of birth." Now, why would he say such a thing? Like, what does that mean? How is the day of death better than the day of birth? Well, there's a hint here in verse 8 when you go further down where he says better is the end of a thing than its beginning. And I think that these are kind of parallel ideas here in this passage. We live in a culture that really sort of denigrates age and the elderly. I feel it more and more as I get older. But we have very little respect for wisdom and experience. But the Ecclesiastes clearly thinks differently. In fact, he appears to view life as an investment. I did a series when we first started Renew Church. I don't know how many of you would remember it. Back in, I think, 2018, we did a series called Life As. How many of you remember this series? Couple people, all right? In that series, we looked at life in a variety of different paradigms, all of which are valid, all of which are biblical, but it's just a different way of looking at life. And the Bible backs up all of these different ideas. We looked at it as a destiny to realize, a mystery to figure out, an adventure to live, a battle to win, a canvas to paint, a test to pass, and then also in that last message, a gift to enjoy. Well, here's another one that you could talk about, life as an investment, right? You really can. This is a biblical idea to see your life as an investment. The Ecclesiastes is saying that the day of death is better than the day of birth because you've had a lifetime to invest your time and energy. This is what he's saying. You've actually accomplished something through your life, right? A newborn baby is beautiful, it's wonderful, but it hasn't accomplished anything. It hasn't had time to invest anything. But by the end of your life, you've invested. You've been building your name. You see that? A precious name, right? A name is better than precious ointment. You've been building your name. You've been building your reputation. It's precious. We all know that it takes a lifetime to build a good reputation. It takes a second to destroy it, right? We know this. Well, a newborn baby has accomplished nothing, but a person on their deathbed hopefully has invested a lot. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that investment idea when we get down to verse 8. Verse 2, he says, it's better, there's that word again, it's better to go to the house of mourning than to the house of feasting. We might say today, it's better to go to the funeral home than the fun house. And you say, no, I like the fun house, right? I don't want to go to the funeral home. But he says here it's actually better. Those who know me well know that I actually, as a pastor, I enjoy doing funerals more than I enjoy doing weddings. You say, what? No, that's actually true. Don't get me wrong. I love weddings. I love the joy of a wedding, the new love, the celebration. It's great. I love all of that. But as a pastor, I prefer experiences that cause people to think about spiritual things. And I find that at funerals, the amount of spiritual thinking going on is way, way, way higher than it is at weddings. Funerals are just way better for that. Now, obviously, no one wants to be at a funeral, but apparently, according to Solomon and all of his wisdom, it's good for us. Somehow it's good for us. Here's a little illustration. You know, as legend has it, in ancient Rome, when a general would parade back into the city after a great victory, usually leading, captives in his train, there was a practice where a servant or companion of the general would whisper to him the words, memento mori, which in Latin means, remember that you will die. It was designed to keep him humble despite his great achievements and to remind him that he was still mortal. It's a good reminder, isn't it? Memento mori. It became a motto for early Christian monks, and early Christian leaders like Tertullian and Thomas à Kempis used that phrase a lot. Well, death is the end of all mankind, and the living lay it to heart, the Ecclesiastes says here. We take it to heart when we go through these times, when we consider death. It's actually good for us. Remembering our death gives focus to our life. It helps us clarify what's important and what we should be investing in during these short days that we've been given under the sun. So death is very significant in that sense. In verse 3, he uses another better statement. He says, sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of face the heart is made glad. Now again, you go, what? How? How is that true? Now, glad is not necessarily the best translation here. The word in Hebrew is yatav, which means to make good or make well. So you could translate it by sadness of face, the heart is made well, or it's improved. So here's an epiphany, guys. Your inner person is actually improved by sorrowful experiences. Did you know that? Your inner person actually gets better. It's improved upon when you go through sorrowful experiences. You don't like them, but they're good for you. The true you gets better. Having experienced sorrow recently, I can attest that it changes your thinking. Sorrow readjusts your values and hopefully your behavior. I've already seen that there are specific things that I'm doing differently now than I was just a month ago. And I would say they're improvements. They're wisdom related. So here's a little takeaway. Stop avoiding sorrow, guys. You don't need to go looking for it, but stop avoiding it. Get comfortable being in it and being around it because there's something good about it. Jesus said, blessed are those who mourn. And I can tell you some of the most beautiful people I know are ones who have experienced deep sorrow. Some of you are sitting here in the room today. But it's made you a beautiful person. In Ecclesiastes chapter 7, verse 4, we'll keep moving. It says, the heart of the wise is in the house of mourning, but the heart of fools is in the house of mirth. You know, it's okay to go to the house of mirth sometimes, go to places where you have a good time and you have fun. It's great. But wise people, he says, tend to be found where there is sorrow and pain. It's just a wise saying and something to really take note of. Let me ask you this question. I hope that this will be a very practical thing, something that you can act on this week. Whose sorrow could you join in with this week? Do you know someone that's suffering? You know someone that's going through a difficult time? Could you join in with them on that this week? Just be there for them, do something to encourage them, spend some time with them. This is the kind of thing God calls us to as his children, right? To support one another in these ways. Let's look at verses 5 and 6. Again, better, he says, it is better for a man to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. For as the crackling of thorns under a pot, so is the laughter of the fools. This also is vanity. He says, it's better to hear the rebuke of the wise than to hear the song of fools. Now, no one likes to be rebuked, but when a wise person takes the time to correct you in something, guys, that's really of great value. It really is. Most people don't have the courage to rebuke someone, to actually, get in their face about something, hopefully in love, right? But that can be of great value, and it takes humility to receive that. But if you do, you will become a better person. It is way more valuable than the song of fools, even though foolish songs are fun, right? Silly songs with Larry, I remember when I was a kid growing up, right? It's way more valuable to hear the rebuke of the wise than just to listen to foolish singing. In verse 6, it says basically that the laughter of fools doesn't have anything lasting to it, right? He's not talking here about good, honest fun and enjoyment. He's talking about fools and just foolishness. A little example, I think, of what he's talking about here is, have you ever been in a place where a group of people were loud and mocking, right? We think of the lunchroom scene in high school, like Mean Girls kind of thing. Where there's no depth to it. People are just laughing and mocking, and you always think that they're laughing at you when they're doing it, right? Maybe they are, but they see themselves as the in-group. Maybe it was at your expense. Listen, the Bible says don't fret over people like that, because their laughter is very short-lived, right? It's like dry twigs that you throw on a fire, right? There's a lot of noise and a big flash, but it's over so quickly. I remember we were at Mike Amaril's a couple of years ago in the winter. He has a big fire pit, and we'll go out there sometimes just to have a campfire. And I remember he had this dried out Christmas tree. He's like, oh, we should throw that on the fire. I'm like, we should definitely throw that on the fire, right? I think Matt Figier has a history of this. So we got this tree, and Mike puts it on the fire, and it was so dried out, it literally just went whoosh. You had to back up. The flame was so intense, and then just gone. It was just consumed literally in about 20 seconds. Well, I think of that when I think of this, the laughter of the fool, it's sort of like that. It's very short-lived. It's intense in the moment, but it's short-lived. And guys, sometimes we are way too influenced by shallow people, by foolish people. Sometimes good people give in to the pressure, and that's what he talks about in verse 7, the first part there. He says, surely oppression drives the wise to madness. Now, many good translations actually render the word oppression a little more specifically to the word extortion. Interesting. Which means threats, right? And the word madness is really better translated as foolishness here. And so you could kind of translate the verse this way. Surely extortion causes the wise to act foolishly. And that's true. Sometimes good people, wise people, still lack courage, still give in, right, to extortion, to threats. When we feel threatened, sometimes we act foolishly. It's too bad, but we do. Sometimes we feel threatened by other people, right? We fear for our reputation, and so we give in and do something that we shouldn't. I find when money is on the line, we can lose our ethics pretty quickly. How many of you have noticed this before? your ethics kind of take a couple notches down when it comes to money, right? Because like, well, I can cut corners here, right? I don't have to, follow the rules completely here. When we fear something dear to us is at risk, right? Sometimes we can act foolishly out of fear. Here's a fact, guys. It's under pressure that we see the strength of someone's character. So when we feel those pressures and those threats, whether it's coming from a person or just from a situation, right? We need to step up and ask God to give us the strength to live with character. The second half of that verse 7 says, and a bribe corrupts the heart. Now, wherever Judeo-Christian ethics have been adopted, corruption has decreased in the world. You can do a little study on that, but it's quite fascinating to see. But corruption is commonplace in most places in the world. It's now becoming very common in North America as well, I hate to say. We all know that a lot of our politicians, even here in North America, are taking bribes. They're having money put in that Cayman Islands account. If so-and-so will just, reward a certain contract, reward them a certain contract, well, some money will show up for you in your account. We know this kind of stuff is going on. For years, Canadians have been naive. I think we've kind of said, Canadians are just honest people. No, Canadians used to be taught Judeo-Christian values, right? That's the difference. But we've stopped teaching them for the most part. And unless God's Spirit brings revival to our land, we're going to continue to become more corrupt as a country. And, that's just the way it goes. That's not even that's not a very daring prophecy. Well, Ecclesiastes chapter 7, moving to the next verse, verse 8, it says, better is the end of a thing than its beginning, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. So we're back at this verse that we referenced earlier. Again, the understanding here is that the end is better because we've spent time investing in something, building something, whether it's a name or a life, right? We've accomplished something over time. So let me ask you this. What are you building with your life? What are you investing in? Day by day, what are you building? What are you investing in? I'll tell you, if it's only your pleasure in the here and now that you're investing in, everything that you've worked for is going to vanish the moment that you die. If that's all that you've invested in, it will be gone the moment that you die. But if you invest in God's kingdom, in righteousness, in people, what you've invested in will endure. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, Paul talks about how we should build on the foundation that Christ laid. Well, what was that foundation? Well, it's the foundation of God's kingdom, of love, of self-sacrifice. That's the foundation that we're supposed to build on. He says, now, if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, and precious stones, or wood, hay, and straw, on the other hand, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through fire. And so there's a beautiful image here that Paul is using of what is it that we're building with? What is the quality of our building, of our investing, right? There's gold and silver and precious stones that will endure going through a fire, but then there's wood, hay, and straw that goes up like a dry Christmas tree. We should all want to invest in things that will last. What are you investing in? Will it last? The second part of verse 8 says, and the patient in spirit is better than the proud in spirit. Now notice he mentions patience here in the context of investing your life. Don't lose sight of the context. He's talking about investing your life. And then he says the patient in spirit are better than the proud in spirit. And we need patience, guys, if we're going to treat life like an investment. That's the point that he's making here. Because investing, you understand, if you invest, the best way to do it is to be slow and steady, just consistent over time, and you will build something good. This is a fact. Wise, patient people build their life and character little by little every day, right? This is how we do it. You know, in football, sometimes you see a team that is, They start out trying to be just slow and consistent, getting a few yards every play, right? If you get 3 or 4 yards every play, you'll keep getting first downs. You'll have a great game, right? You probably win the game. But, if they're not doing that, if it's not going well, rather than keep trying, they just start throwing long bombs, right? Hail Mary, right? And sometimes, that's a good picture for us when we think about the wise versus the proud. The foolish are proud in spirit. They don't follow wise advice. They're always in a hurry. They take shortcuts. They look for quick fixes and quick returns. But that's not what the Bible teaches, right? Whether it's in investing or in building a life and building your character. Slow, steady, every day, right? Wise, patient people build their life and character little by little. Well, from here out, the ideas are a little more disconnected, so we'll take them one at a time. Look at verse 9. He says, "Be not quick in your spirit to become angry, for anger lodges in the heart of fools." And we can kind of hear the brother of Jesus, James's voice here, can't we? When we read this, when he says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. This is something that I have wrestled with in the past. I learned certain patterns when I was young, when it came to just, getting angry. If you're someone who gets angry quickly, let me just be straight with you. You don't have a personality problem. You don't have a life balance problem, right? I can tell you from experience, you have a character problem, and you need to own it. It's a character problem, and you need to change. You need to work at it and pray about it. Those who keep excusing it or denying it are fools. And I've worked at this over the years. I still fail way too often. But I can tell you, I do not want to be a fool. I do not want to strain my relationships. I don't want to lose respect from people. I don't want to alienate people. And this is what you will do if you are quick to get angry. And so anger lodges in the heart of fools. Don't let it lodge there. Get it out. Get rid of it. Work on it. Verse 10, he says, "Say not, why were the former days better than these?" There's that word better again. "For it is not from wisdom that you ask this." This is a great verse. There's so much wisdom packed in this verse, especially for those of us who are older, and I count myself in that camp at this stage in my life. As the Ecclesiastes is evaluating what is good or what is better, he said one thing you shouldn't do is fall into the mindset that the old days were always better. How many of you are willing to admit it, that you kind of do this? You're like, yeah, the old days were kind of better, right? This is tough, especially for an 80s kid like me, because let's just be honest, we think we had the best, right? We really think the 80s were awesome, and so many things seem to be better. Now, it's not bad to cherish the things that you appreciated in your childhood or in that era that you considered, maybe it was your teen years, but we need to remember, wisdom tells us that memories age kind of like wine, right? They sort of improve over time. So you look back and say, oh, everything was so good back then. No, it wasn't all so good, right? It wasn't that rosy. And we need to appreciate that every era has its good and its bad. In the 80s, we had probably stronger relationships because we had no internet. We had the Cosby Show. We had the best music ever. We really had the best music ever. But we also had the Cold War. We had telephones with disgustingly long, curly cords. And we even had the mullet. Right? Now, we try to forget the mullet. We really try, but that's some of you young people, you bring it back. It's like, why? Why are you bringing this back? Listen, can I ask you something, young people? Find your own fashion disasters, all right? Find your own. We made that. We're really embarrassed about it. As a joke, it's probably okay, but anyway. Here's some wisdom for older people. Don't live in the past. You're not finished investing yet, right? And when you start living in the past, you stop living in the present, you stop investing. It's like you're dying early. You're still here. You've got stuff to invest. Focus on now. See the good things that are going on now. Find the opportunities that exist around you now. you might be surprised how much good there is out there. Verses 11 and 12, he says, wisdom is good with an inheritance, an advantage to those who see the sun. For the protection of wisdom is like the protection of money. And the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the life of him who has it. As Solomon continues to share the things that he has discovered to be good or better, he points out that it is good to get both material and immaterial blessings given to us. That's a real blessing. If you get the material ones and the immaterial together, you really can't do better than that. The inheritance would be the material ones like money and possessions. We all love that when someone leaves us something in that way. But then he also says wisdom, which is, these immaterial blessings, these bits of, wisdom and experience that people leave for us. The argument that he makes is that wisdom provides protection and security much the same way that money does. And when you think about it, this is really true. It really does. Wisdom is like an insurance policy. Wise people avoid so many of the perils and pains that this life can bring. It's really a beautiful thing. Wisdom can protect you even better than insurance policies. A very tangible example of this was my son Joseph left close to a month ago now. He left to go to BC to hang out for a bit and then to go with a friend to Hawaii. And then to come back to BC and hang out for another week before coming home. And when he was going out, I knew that he would be seeing, a lot of this. I've never been to Hawaii, but I've seen a lot of pictures. I know kind of the deal. It's a lot of cliffs, a lot of beauty. And I'm thinking, he's going to be jumping off of stuff, right? So I just said to him, listen, when you're out there, just promise, don't jump off anything unless you're 100% sure of what you're jumping off of and how deep the water is and whatever. He says, yeah, I'll be careful, Dad, right? But, that's just how wisdom works, right? It can preserve the life of somebody if they listen and if they take that good advice. As parents, we try to impart wisdom like this to protect our kids physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And wise children listen and they benefit from it. Well, the next verse 13, the final verse here in this section, he says, consider the work of God, who can make straight what he has made crooked. Now, this is interesting, because back in chapter 1, verse 15, he lamented that what is crooked cannot be made straight. How many of you remember that back in chapter 1, right? But here he gives more detail, and he says that it is God who has made things crooked. Did you catch that? Right? What he has made crooked, he says. So he's blaming God. Is he just blaming God for everything that is bad? Now, I don't think so. I don't think that's what he's doing here. We started the series by showing that he did know the law, meaning that he would have understood the creation story, the fall, and also the curse that God placed on humanity after falling into sin. Remember, guys, God is the one who brought the curse on earth after we sinned. And he did that intentionally, and he intentionally left us in a world of pain and sorrow and confusion so that we would remember that this world is not the way that God intended it. Every day when you wake up, God wants you to be reminded the world is not what he intended. What you're seeing, this is not what he intended. And he wanted that to be very obvious. So I think his point here in bringing this up at the end of the section is to remind us in our pursuit of what is good and what is better, temper your expectations. That's what he's saying. There isn't much perfection to find here in planet Earth. Every once in a while, you think you might see it, right? The perfect sunset. You think you may see it. Guys, enjoy it in those brief moments because it is fleeting and it is elusive. This is the idea. And God had his part in that. He wants us to remember that things are not the way he intended them to be. He did that so that we would continue to seek him. The band's going to come down and close. Guys, it seems so obvious to me that we were actually made to crave perfection. The perfect house, the perfect body, perfect makeup, perfect job, perfect relationship, like whatever it is you're talking about. In fact, this is kind of what we do in life today. We create our Pinterest vision board so that we know what we're chasing after, and then we try to live out those things. And then after we've lived them, we put them on our Instagram feed, which is also perfectly color coordinated, right? This is what we do. So don't tell me we don't crave perfection. We're literally trying to live perfection all of the time. This is what we do. And honestly, it's kind of logical. Because the Bible teaches that we're made to seek after God, that we only find satisfaction in him, and he is perfect. So it kind of makes sense. Many of you have been excited to dig into this book of Ecclesiastes because I think you also crave perfection. And you wonder why, as hard as you try, you just don't seem to be able to find it. Like the Ecclesiastes, you experience a lot of frustration. I hope that you are gaining some really good insight from this series. You know, it's good to crave perfection. You just need to understand where it's found, right? It's found in God. It's found in God's word. It's found in God's ways. You know, David craved perfection and beauty. The beauty of a woman made him fall. He was an artist, right? A poet. We know that he craved perfection, but he eventually got clarity on this, and he left us some wisdom in his writings in the Psalms. Look at Psalm 27. He says, "One thing I have asked of the Lord that I will seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple." This is what David came to discover, that true perfection and beauty were only found in God. In Psalm 19, he says, "The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart, and the commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes." Let's pray. Father, again, thank you for this wisdom that Solomon has shared with us. He had the opportunity to try so many things and to get as close as humans can get to experiencing perfection. And yet his heart was empty until he recognized that it's you who provides that perfection. You are the only one who can satisfy. Lord, I pray that you would help us to see that. Help us not to be fools who spend our whole lives ignoring the wisdom that has been given to us and having to learn everything the hard way. Lord, help us to trust what you're saying here, and to stop chasing satisfaction in things that just can't provide it. Help us to turn to you and to see that that relationship with you is the answer to everything. As Jesus said, your life in us will spring up like living water in our hearts, moment by moment, day by day. We will no longer be spiritually thirsty, but we will experience great satisfaction. Lord, if anyone is here today and they have not experienced that, I pray that they would come and speak with me or with someone who can explain that to them even today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. at Cineplex Cinemas in Milton, or visit us online at renewchurch.ca/connect.